Elden Ring is big, like really big. You'll start off with this little small map and think you've seen it all. Then you'll be exploring and find a big ass elevator that takes you super deep underground. And then you'll realize there's a whole nother map for the underground world. And that's not it. Eventually you'll find a chest that'll take you up even farther, all the way up north. And you open up your map now and it will be really big. And the world will just keep on expanding as you progress through it. It is absolutely massive. When you first start up, it'll pitch you up against someone who you're most likely not prepared to fight right out the gate. He'll end up kicking your ass and sending you straight to the real starting zone. Well, you'll open up this big door and you'll be right out in the open world. Now for the most part, there is no hand holding. But there will be these lost graces that will vaguely point you in the general direction to go to progress the main story. But for the most part, you are free to roam and go wherever you want. One of the best features is you'll end up getting a horse. And guess what? That horse can double jump. That's right. Now visually, this game is very impressive. The landscape and the scenery sometimes is just breathtaking. You will travel all around the different types of lands and areas. You'll be in forests. You'll find yourself running through the rain in the wastelands, the snowy mountains up north. The world feels alive and constantly moving. As you explore through this land, you will catch yourself just stopping and looking around and taking in the scenery. As you run around and are exploring the lands in between, you'll come across various NPCs and vendors all over the place. They can sell you various key items that will be very useful to a whole bunch of trash as well. Some NPCs you'll be able to talk to and help out. You can do tasks for that will progress through a series of events that sometimes will span throughout the entire game. There are so many different outcomes and quests. It will be easy to miss a lot, and it will most likely require multiple playthroughs to see all the various outcomes for these NPCs. Alongside these NPCs, you will encounter wild bosses all over the map, like giant dragons, to the Knights Cavalry who are guarding and holding down the bridges. There will be giant death birds who will just drop down from the sky. While they do reuse a lot of the bosses in the later half of the game, the monster variety is still pretty huge, and you will encounter various types of enemies. It's something you will just have to play to experience. Now the combat will take two forms mainly, one which will be riding around your horse and just slaying mobs. Horse combat feels very good and responsive. You got heavy attacks and light attacks, can attack on your right or left side, can really do work on your horse. Then you will come across no horse zones, where you will be forced to fight on the ground. Ground combat still feels responsive and good. You get good invincibility frames from rolling, which will be your main form of defense. Combat is quick and evolving, and in tight situations, you'll catch yourself holding your breath. Every now and then there will be these big scary doors, and when you walk through them, you'll encounter bosses. It's one of the most challenging parts of the game. Boss design varies. For the most part, they'll be designed to mess up your reflexes and bait you into some really bad positions. The game design for most bosses really seems to try and make them have these big, heavy wind-up attacks to keep you constantly guessing when it's going to come. And then they'll mix it up every now and then with some really fast and quick attacks, just really keep you on your toes. If you want to get through these fights, you're really going to have to learn them and master the timing of all their moves. Expect to grind on these fights, both a little bit of work and sometimes a little bit of help. When you finally down these big bosses, it will feel very rewarding. When all that pent up stress from grinding out the fight is released after beating them, it will be a very satisfying moment, as you reward with a nice big message that tells you great enemy felled. For all the love and praise I can give this game, there are some problems with the game that stop me from giving it a perfect score. The game balance seems like it tips and scales in different directions constantly, and it isn't very balanced at all. It's kind of all over the place. You can go from being under leveled and getting murdered in almost one shot, to, if you have been exploring the map heavily, checking all the nooks and crannies, the caves, the catacombs, you'll quickly find yourself outscaling, out-leveled. You'll be one-shotting all the small mobs, two-shotting all the medium-sized mobs. You may even find yourself doing massive damage to bosses and completely trivializing some of them even. After a certain point in the game though, it feels almost as if it doesn't matter how much vigor you have. The damage scaling will just get to an absurd point where you'll just always be taking an insane amount of damage no matter what, and every mistake will be costly. This ties in heavily with the difficulty spike that happens way later in the game. One last minor negative I could bring up about the game will have to do with all the catacombs and caves. There's so many of them. This isn't a bad thing, but as you constantly travel through all these cave systems and catacombs, you start feeling as if you are running down the same cave slope or down the same catacomb stairs over and over again. It feels as if they all kind of blend together, and while there are some areas that stand out, for the most part, it feels almost as if they're all just randomly generated areas that just kind of mesh together. There are so many of them at times, it feels like they are all the same. It does get very repetitive very quickly. And then you run into these things. Yeah, when you run into these things, it changes up the pace a nice bit. But man, are these guys a pain to deal with. I hate this place. With a massive world, engaging combat, crazy difficulty spikes, endless character customization, as you look out into the world thinking you can go anywhere your eyes can see, you might never finish your first playthrough. I give Elden Ring a 9 out of 10.